So I wanted to go back and kind of retouch on. I actually went back and was looking at the some of the yearbooks that jogged my memory on timelines for the history of the team, And of course, when I got on was in, late summer of 1980, after the riots. And then, went on and as a team member, as a sniper, team member, just a grunt, whatever Bill Holder told me to do. He was my team leader then. Basically, whatever he told me to do. When did it. So, but in 1985, MJ Payne and Raul Artechi, MJ Payne got promoted to chief, 84, 85 in there. Left the team, took Raul Artechi with him. Promoted Sergeant Bill Holder to lieutenant in charge of the South team. Bill was stationed in Carlsbad, and then promoted Andy Benavides from sergeant, who was in Socorro, I believe, to Las Vegas, put him in charge of the North team. So it was still North team concept. In 85, I was stationed in Eagle Nest, still assigned to the South team. Tim Sharp was my team leader. Jerry Urbon was the other team leader for the South team. And let me see, we had on my team, it was Tim Sharp, Ken Waller, me. Pat Wood might have come on then. I'm pretty sure Pat Wood had just come on. And so it's Tim Sharp, Ken, Pat Wood. And then on the other team, Jerry Urbon was a team leader. And his guys, Ken Riedemann. I'm going to kind of refer to these pictures here. But Ken Riedemann, Tommy Ford, John McInich, let me see, those guys were on the team then. Hang on, let me look at this book and I'll get the names right quick. But yeah, so, so the North team, was Andy Benavides, and then, let me see, there was Juan Ontiveros. He'd gotten on the team. John Balderson had gotten on the team. John was assigned north because he was out of Santa Fe. Glenn Huber had gotten on the team. And of the old-timers still on the team, Frank DeLo, Paul Muddes, and of course Andrew Benavides, Lieutenant Benavides, Jim Karate had gotten on the team. And then, of course, Jim Butler was on the team, Jerry Bond. But, so we had a change, and we was going into that change right in there where we was starting to incorporate our shooting standards and physical fitness standards. Of course, a lot of those older guys, the originals, they were older men now. They're in their 40s, late 30s and 40s. And some of them were in great shape. Some of them were in not so great shape. But I can tell you this, you didn't want any of them to get their hands on you, because then you would find out how much in shape they were. Oh my goodness. I remember going to actually the CTA for the first time with all of us. And I don't know if you ever heard of Ron McCarthy. Ron McCarthy, one of the original LAPD SWAT members.
Right.
And he came up and he's like, "You are the biggest bunch of meaty guys I've ever seen in my life." He said, "I've never seen a team that has such mass that can move like you guys." And granted, some of the guys couldn't move long distances really fast, but they could move quick, short, quarter horse race, do whatever needed to be done. But at 5, we started doing the physical fitness standards, incorporating that mile and a half in under 12 minutes, incorporating the pull-ups, for entrance, it was 10 pull-ups. For minimum standards, stay on the team, it was 6. and 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, do that. And a lot of those guys, they just didn't want to put out the effort to get in shape at their age, which I get it. And they also realized, the tech team was a younger man's game. Being a net, it's tough to be old and broken and try to do all those things. So a lot of those gentlemen gracefully bowed out, passed the torch, and did that. And then back then we were still carrying an 85. And I want to say all the way like through 88, 89, maybe 90, we carried that Mini 14. We were shooting Colt Series 70 1911 pistols as the team handgun, but they didn't want us to carry the team handgun on duty because tradition, still carrying the revolver,
Right.
So we had to carry the revolver in uniform, Class A's. But when we were team, we switch over and carry the 1911. So we had to train specifically with both, qualify specifically with both. We did have Benelli's, old Benelli's, 12 gauge that had extended tubes, held seven in the mag tube, one in the pipe, give you eight round mag, which was super, those super, basically what we call super 90s,
Right.
and stocks, heavy as hell, but great guns. My gosh, great guns.
Did you wind up swapping those out to the composite stocks, or did you get different shotguns?
No, later on, we got different shotguns to that Super 90 with the composite stocks. But, the good thing about it was, whenever we turned in those old, those first, those original Benelli's with the wooden stocks, they sold them to a dealer that sold them back to us if we wanted to buy them. So I got my original.
Do you still have yours?
I still have my original.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Matter of fact, still use it calling coyotes. Well, I did, use it calling coyotes for years and years and years afterwards and stuff like that. I love it. Great gun.
And
Fast cycling.
And the Series 70s, did they buy those for y'all new?
Yes, they were bought new. Now, they were just stock 70s. So the majority of us, I'm on my fourth barrel.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's how much I shot it. When they first bought it, it had those split bushings, serrated bushings. Of course, we took them down, and had 1911 guys work them over, go through. I put a match barrel in my gun. Solid bushing, milled and machined to the barrel. Basically, it tightened it up, made it a little more accurate. Of course, all that was money from my pocket. But I used to use that pistol on those javelina, the law enforcement javelina hunt down south in Granite Gap, and on bigs on javelina with it. I've made some shots on bigs, 130 to 50 yards. Just, because, and I won a bet, actually, a case of beer on a bet on a shot, and on about 140, 50 yard shot, and killed a big. And with that 1911, I was shooting 185 grain plus Bs at it, but I killed the big. And funny thing, it was a pass through.
Were you hand loading those plus Bs?
No, they were bought. That's kind of one of the things I stayed away from. Hand loading was because of the civil liability. We actually actually ordered some 185 plus Bs through the department and got him to carry it, or let us carry it through the team. And actually, John Balderson, whenever he took over the team, John and Pat took over the team. And I want to say right around that 1987 time frame. And I want to say when we went to the 87 mine strike out in Gallup, Bill Holder and Andy Benavides was in charge. And then there was a transition. There was a transition to where Wood and John Balderson took over the team as team leader assistant. And it was right in there. So, and it was right in there. And that's when I actually got made team leader right in there immediately after those mine strikes. Because for the 1987 penitentiary escape, which was just like 3 weeks after that mine strike, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I was the team leader then. So, and my team was me, Leo Martinez, Jim Karate, Farron Sagata, Steve Nance, Robert O'Keefe. And that was guys that was on my team that I was team leader for. And so we ran a lot, done that 87 pin escape. But that, and those are the guys, and I don't know if you remember that picture of Cañoncito where we're coming into our, when we had a temporary base camp or temporary staging area, walking down the railroad tracks.
Right.
And that was that one that made, and I cannot remember the name of that magazine, but that picture went nationwide on that magazine cover.
Oh, no
from
kidding.
that thing. Yeah, that picture went nationwide, and which was pretty good kudos for the department, and the team, because it kind of got us some extra funding that next year, which really helped a lot. But yeah, that Cañoncito thing, we spent two and a half, almost 3 days there on a bogus BS thing, some girlfriend claims she was abducted, and it was all sympathy crap. And they finally uncovered it. But man, you talk about a lot of manhood, a lot of physical exertion on that crap. Because we hunted and tracked and hunted and made entries in every house in that community from Valencia, which is going east toward the Pecos, across the Glorieta battlefield, all the way up in the Glorieta, up on top, and worked all that on foot. And then back down, up again, back down, up again, everywhere. And I mean, it was just nonstop. And I mean, we'd come in and just sleep on the ground or in our units. So mostly just sleep on the ground. And because it was hot, just sleep. Couldn't sleep in your unit much because there wasn't enough breeze. So just sleep on the ground and then get up and go. But, we was using those Mini 14s, and they're fairly heavy guns anyway. I remember our lighting systems because we were around the clock. This was before all of the surefires,
Right.
the weapons mounted lighting systems, all of that stuff. So, of course, I had a 5-cell D-cell flashlight that I taped to the front of my gun because it was the brightest one. It was the brightest one I had. And the majority of the team guys was taping 4-cells, 4-cell flashlights to it. And we just used black tape, electric tape. And that was our mounting system. And I would mount mine up at the 10 or 11 o'clock. Tried to pull it back as much as I could because it was a long flashlight. And
Covered just about the entire forend, wouldn't it?
It did cover the entire form. Matter of fact, it came all the way back. If I mounted it on the right side of it would interfere with the charging handle on the Mini 14. Right. So I did it, and I pulled it back so it would illuminate the ambient light would illuminate the front side, so I could see my front side at night. That's how I ran. And then eventually, surefires came into place, and then we just started doing the same dang thing, taping those on, And of course, electric tape is a lot cheaper than, $100 light mount. And
Right.
and I didn't like back then. Those light mounts was all on the 6 o'clock position of your forearm, which means they did not light up your front sides. So I always brought mine around either the 10 o'clock or the 2 o'clock position to light up my front side. That's the way I always ran them.
Right.
Even throughout my tenure, I never used a light mount. Never used a light mount. I taped it on. It worked better. Worked better for me.
It took a long time before it started. They started coming out with those mounts. You probably remember those that mounted on the front
Yeah.
sight post.
Right, yeah. And it's like, see, I didn't like that mounted on the front sight post because the base of the light was forward of the front sight post. So your front sight was not illuminated. Now, if you were shining against a white wall, it could be kind of like backlit, but it was not illuminated. So I always stuck my front side, here, and then the light would be here, illuminating the front side and pushing forward. And I could see my front side crystal clear. And that's why I was
Excellent.
ran. Yeah, that's why I was ran. It's like never did use a store-bought lighted mount.
So I was flipping through some pictures the other day, and I found a bunch of the pictures from that. We went out to DOE. We got invited to go out and compete in that spot seat competition.
Yeah, the spotsy
'99, and
right.
I'd completely forgotten about how you, me, Mark, Chad, and
Greg Richardson.
Greg Richardson were out there for that. That was a good time.
We actually won it. Remember, we actually won that. That was actually a great into my career because it was the only competition that we ever got to. Well, it was the first competition that we actually ever got to compete in as a team. Um, I know BCSO and Albuquerque Police Department had got to participate in those teams, and I know BCSO, they were stupendous. They ran and ran and won. I know at least 3 of those competitions, and we lucked out and won it when they were there, just by the skin of our nose, I think. But we won it and just beat them out. But I know APD, they won a lot of, or at least participated, won 1 or 2. They were real lucky to have participated in those teams, in those events. I don't know if you remember, but they were pretty difficult. Maybe not for you, but of course I was older, but they were physically challenging to me.
They were very challenging. Absolutely,
Yeah,
I love
physically
that.
challenging. Oh yeah, uh, but yeah, it was real great. But getting back to that, it was. I remember telling those guys is like, because our teams were real cohesive. For the most part, especially our team in APD. We were a little closer than BCSO, mainly because we just work more with them and just I think do logistics. But BCSO, their team was unique. They were part time and full time for a while. I think for 2 or 3 years they were full time, and then of course budget cuts back to part time. Then, but they were small man teams, 10, 12 teams, 10, 12 man teams, and so um, they they worked as much as they could, but um, and joining in with us APD as much as we could. But, I wanted to go back and say one good thing about the team, BCSO team, and I have to apologize to looking at my first video uh, and my joking remarks about them. shooting their dogs. Didn't come off as a joke, and I almost left it downright insulting. But it was not that is not the point of it. Because um, their uniqueness and the way they had to come up in that era of all of us implementing those tactics, those dynamic entry tactics on those crack houses that was just forming in the 80s, mid 80s. I'm sorry, mid to late 80s. With all of the um, foreign nationals, that the politicians brought in, and so the new flavor of the day was setting up those crack houses, as storefronts. And then, of course, they fortified them. And then, of course, the dirt bags, had dogs as sentries chained outside, most usually big dogs, pit bulls and crap like that. So with BCSO, their uniqueness in Bernalillo County, because, responsible for everything outside of the city in the county, you know, going hell and gone west, South Valley and the North Valley, chock full of those meth houses, crack houses. And of course, the techniques of the day was, of course, try not to shoot the dogs, fire extinguishers, flash diversionary device, just overwhelming with packed manpower, which when you got a small team, that don't work. So the next thing is, okay, give a guy a fire extinguisher. Well, now you've got a guy going in with a fire extinguisher. To work a fire extinguisher takes both hands. So he can't be primary on a gun. So now he's got to have a cover officer. That's two officers to take care of one damn dog. So, you know, it's just not practical. So just want to make sure it's clear. Those guys wound up having to shoot a lot of dogs, but it was just what they had to do, and it was totally justified. Bad thing for the damn dogs, but couldn't let them go and chew their freaking gonads off while they're trying to make entry into the dang house.
It's been said a lot of times, not bad dogs, but bad owners.
Yeah, bad owners, but those guys, they just, it was just kind of like that's just the way they had to do it, to keep the guys from getting hurt. So, but on those dynamic entries, you look back on those things. Of course, our 16-man team to do a dynamic entry, we couldn't do it by ourselves. I mean, the team could, but if we just did it with state policemen, we'd have to call in another eight uniform officers to run outer perimeter, help augment inner perimeter. In addition to the narcotics agents that were coming. It was usually 4 to 6, maybe more, that would come in. It was their cases. So, we were depending on 12 to 15 guys that were not team members, that were not, team trained, that were not equipped, with the weaponry or in the skills, and the techniques to perform those duties of dynamic entries. So um, it took a lot of manpower, and that's the reason why we augmented with Albuquerque and BCSO, and utilized those teams, and they utilized us, Albuquerque more so, but mainly because we did so many warrants. And with Albuquerque Police Department, with the task force that the state police, APD, was using, it was primarily inside the city. So that's where a majority of the warrants were. And we just augmented those.
So y'all started with that in the late 80s already, or was that more of the early 90s?
late 80s and early 90s. And we were doing that because we were doing all of our training out there at Central Training Academy, in the mid to late 80s. That's where we were going through SRT1, SRT2, SRT3, through the Department of Energy. The instructors out there, Ray Kaufman, Jack Jones, let me see, of course augmented by the part-timers from Los Angeles, Jim Welch, Tim Wickett, all of those guys was the full cadre at the Central Training Academy, which was ran by the Department of Energy. And that was basically the premier training entity for the Department of Energy as far as training the cadre of officers that transported or guarded all of our nuclear assets all around the country. Because all of those entities had basically special response teams at their locations, with specific training, basically dynamic training, recovery, direct threat. And, and I thank God, like for Jack Jones, because he was such a, Jack's, he still bleeds black and gray, you know, state police through and through.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So he got us involved in all of that. And there was, um, there was some pushback from the Department of Energy because our team, which was, we were running 16-man. Albuquerque team, they were sometimes, I want to say running, they were 10-man, sometimes 12. And then BCSOs, they're at least 10 to 12-man team. BCSO, they trained every Thursday night, Thursday afternoon, Thursday night, every Thursday afternoon, every week. Those guys were lucky. They trained with those guys. In addition to that, let's see, Jack Jones, I'm trying to think, Tim Wickett, Lee Spitler, they all wound up getting deputy sheriff commissions and started augmenting their team on their missions, in addition to working out there. So that's probably a big reason why they didn't need, our teams augmenting them, because they had those guys so much. And along about then, I don't know if you remember retired Marine Corps Sergeant Major Jerry Daniels. Anyway, Jerry had retired from the Marine Corps then and was out there, and he was another one that was on the cadre of that. And if you've ever seen Jerry Daniels, trust me, you would remember him. But he just recently passed away last year. But Jerry, when he went there, retired Marine Corps, recon, he was the recon sergeant major. Did you ever see the movie with Clint Eastwood, Heartbreak Ridge?
Right.
Jerry Daniels was the sergeant major in Marine Recon at Pendleton, where they went and filmed that. And Clint Eastwood had to go and approve everything through Jerry Daniels. Jerry Daniels, and he made this statement, he said, when Clint Eastwood came to meet him, and of course, Clint Eastwood came to meet him, and this was before his haircut, and he walked up and told him, he goes, what do I need to do? And then Jerry told him, get a fucking haircut. He said, when you show back up here on this base as Marine Recon, get a fucking haircut. Or don't show up. Next day he showed up with his haircut like that in the movie.
I
But,
bet he did.
oh, yeah, he did. But, yeah, but anyway, Jerry was like, I guess, subject matter expert, I don't know what to call him, on that movie. But, anyway, when Jerry came out, let me see, Leo Martinez, me, Waller, Clint Huber, we were taking the SRT3 course. During that course, Jerry was in charge of our physical fitness program in the morning. So every morning we showed up 0500 out there at the base. You know where the gymnasium is and the track that's located just south of that McDonald's off base. We had to show up there at 05 a.m. And so Jerry would take us on runs. Of course, we'd all be in our PT gear. Jerry fatigues combat boot. And so the first run that we ran, we took off and we headed out towards the bay, headed out towards the range, ran past the car, ran past the golf course going to the CTA range, ran out there, ran out past the bridge that goes to the CTA range, turned around just past the bridge, and then ran back. It was like 7 or 8 miles. I don't know. But we had to do end-end runs. So when the guys would trail behind, the leaders had to loop back around and pick up the trailers. And then eventually we just kept doing it. Well, we never was in the back. Even Leo, with his short legs, never faltered, stayed right with us. I mean, he had to run 3 times as far. So it was funny. We got back. So then we get back. Then we did quarter-mile sprints, do push-ups for 30 seconds, quarter-mile sprints, do sit-ups for 30 seconds, quarter-mile sprints, do squat thrusts, quarter-mile sprints, do pull-ups, and that was our workout. Oh my God. So we were shooting him at the range, and everybody's like, we're just throttled, but we made it. It was funny. But Jerry, what a PT master. This guy just built, and good shooter, but a great guy. But was augmenting BCSO. So in the late 80s, that's where we became real close with those guys. BCSO, APD was working those classes out there, or getting to attend those classes. The SRT1. There was a lot of pushback about a year or so in from the Department of Energy, from headquarters, Washington, D.C. Some of those politicians back there didn't like the amount of money that they were spending on these 3 local departments, because it was free to us. We would go out there, I don't know how many rounds, thousands of rounds I shot, on those training sessions, because it was like, shoot as much as you can, get as much training, and flashbangs. So it was very expensive for the Department of Energy. There was a short, stay of, we couldn't go train. And very short. I do not know if you remember Senator Pete Domenici.
I do.
Yeah, he was a senior, he's a Republican, very, very pro law enforcement. He was on the finance committee for the Department of Energy, and he got word, he got word through basically Jack Jones and his connection. And that they were cutting all of his funds. They were basically kicking us out, And so Jack went to bat for us. Of course, once Senator Domenici got word of this, messing with his boys in New Mexico, they said, sure, no problem. You don't have to train them. But he told them, how are you going to train anybody else without any money? He said, if you don't train those boys, then you don't train anybody.
That's great. He went to bat for you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. He went to bat for us. And it was just like, then it's like, because prior to then, they made slots for, prior to then, we were basically taking up slots where the Department of Energy guys just didn't feel their school. They had a 24-man class, and the sites might send 19 guys. 4 or 5 guys from local could attend, And it was almost like uh, we got these openings. Can you send guys right? So it would be a scramble of calling to get people busted loose from the districts, orders cut, and get them down and, get them down to attend the damn school in 3 or 4 days. And, that was quite a chore for some of the guys. Cause, like a lot of our guys, well, I was stationed in Eagle Nest, a lot of our guys was, Alamogordo, Las Cruces, Gallup, places like that. It's like, pack your shit, get over here, be here Sunday afternoon. You're starting training Monday morning. By the way, you got to do a qual with MP5s, 90% or better with pistol and rifle.
Right out of
And
the box.
right out of the box. Uh, so, and then after 2 minutes you got involved, it was a little bit more of, we're going to bring 5 of you guys in, or 4 of you guys in, and start where they were just scheduling for the most part. But, man, I don't know what those called. The SRT3 course, it only was a month long, 5 weeks long. Uh, Thousands and thousands of rounds, you know, hundreds of flashlight devices. Uh, not to mention some of the other stuff we used to do. When we did that, they brought helicopters out there and we did fast roping. Did you ever get to do fast roping out of helicopter?
We never did. No, we didn't ever do any fast roping out of the helicopter. And
I know we did rappelling, but they taught us fast roping, and this was part of that, a response to crack houses, dynamic entries, and things like that, to where if you had a location way out and about, that you could put people on the ground relatively quick, and you can get people out of that helicopter damn quick, dude. From
absolutely.
35, 40 foot above, and it was fun as hell, dangerous as crap, but I loved it. Fun, fun, fun. I guess that's what being young and stupid does for you.
Right.
Not realizing how close, you know. But so then, we really bonded with, these, APD and BCSO and worked those teams. And then, it just all fell into place. We, use our help, we'll use your help, augment the teams. We're all trained the same, same exact concept, same except everything, hand signals, same terminology, nothing different,
Makes it
you
a
know.
lot easier to integrate everybody when you're all
Oh
trained.
my gosh, yeah, side 1, side 2, side 3, side 4, everything was the same, nothing changed. You just jump right in and go, nothing changed. It was great. That worked for a lot of years, worked for a lot of years, and it was great. Basically all the way through my tenure, till I retired. Of course, our weaponry, back then, they were shooting MP5s. That was kind of I guess, the standard for teams doing these crack houses, dynamic entries on crack houses, shooting MP5s, of course, MP5s, H&K MP5s. Back then, and there was well, most of them were 9mm. They did have some in 45 caliber, and they did have some in 10mm. And of course, shooting pistol caliber weapons, to me, is never that good for human targets, mainly because they're just not devastating enough. But the theory was fire on full automatic. Every press of the trigger was a controlled bear. So out of a 30-round magazine, you had basically 15 controlled bears, 15 segments, of 2 and 2 and 2, 2 So typical, failure drill on using a semi-automatic pistol is, body shot, immediately hit to the failure drill, one press to the head. With the MP5s in full automatic mode, it was press, full automatic, two rounds, then 2 rounds to the head. And uh, the, the technique and the trick was getting the timing right with your trigger manipulation to only get 2 rounds off, not 3 and not 1. Don't short stroke the trigger. And it really didn't take that much training. It actually came very easy to me. And so that's how we trained. And let me see, John Balderson took over about 1980, 85, 86. No, sorry, 87. John Balderson Patwood took over around 87 because they ran the 87 pin escapes. John was not there all that long, maybe another year. Then he turned it over to Chris Mays and Patwood. And then Chris made captain, and then I took it over around 90-ish, somewhere in 90. I was still a sergeant, took over the team then, and then shortly thereafter got me a lieutenant. But that's when we really started pushing and working hard those crack houses. Narcotics was working with APD task force, and then of course we were training out there at the base and making great camaraderie, leaps and strides. So then we just melted in and went to work. Uh, um, when I got made team leader, one of the things that we opted to do was later on, of course, there was some fallacies with the MP5 on penetration. I don't know if you remember those studies, but so it was actually Albuquerque Police Department who brought this to light because Albuquerque and but what they were doing with the MP5 shooting 9mm and 10s, of course, with a lower velocity, heavier grain bullets, um, penetration inside interior walls was far greater with pistol caliber weapons than with high velocity rifle rounds.
Right.
So, and they proved this. Actually, Neil Terry was one of the guys that did one of the study. So they got, MP5, stacked sheet wall together, just plates of sheet wall, fired through it. And I want to say it was, 9mm was going like through 23, 21, 23 layers of sheet wall. Of course, in a regular stick house, there's one wall, sheet wall, one wall, sheet wall. So it's, basically you're looking at going the length of a house and exiting, into oblivion with these pistol caliber rounds. I want to say shooting, 223 Remington or 5.56 NATO with 55 grain soft tip. They were only going through 11 sheets of drywall, which meant a lot less penetration overall as far as going out if you missed your intended target. So we determined that it was much safer overall to utilize, 5.56 or 223. And so that's when the transition started going, transitioning out of the MP5s from the pistol caliber.
So that was early 90s. The department also went to those H bars in the early
Yes,
90s. Was that about the same time?
yes, yes. As a matter of fact, we got H bars before we got M4s on the team. So our H bars was our entry gun with 22-inch barrel. Now, personally, I didn't mind it. I really didn't mind it just because I could wield it. With my stature, I didn't have any problem wielding it at all. Of course, then, you develop the technique of, you know, sling and transition to a handgun in close proximity. So that was a technique that we utilized, handgun transition. Uh, but I still got my H bar that was, we used. Um, it was the one they issued on the department, but the team, because they were full automatic then. And then we eventually got the ones later on that was the H bar with a full automatic selector switch, and worked with those. That one I didn't. That one I didn't get. That one stayed with the department. Then, turned in our MP5s, and then eventually went to M4s. No selector switch, just straight semi. But we did have some G3s, and we did keep some H bars with the selector switches. Now, one thing we did have on those selector switches, they were not the 3-shot burst. They were full automatic.
Full auto.
They were full auto, you know. And of course, the techniques of full auto, basically the only thing they're worth is just making a lot of noise and spraying a lot of bullets that doesn't need a whole lot of anything. The only good thing full automatic is for is extreme close counter ambush techniques. That's it.
Right.
You know, accurate deadly gunfire, far rolls a day. So, but we would train, and I don't know if you remember training. You know, um, the counter ambush techniques. Once in a while, doing the Australian peel. Where,
Right.
you know, uh, those techniques where you're dumping and hauling ass and going, those viable techniques, getting out of an ambush, a kill zone. And that's basically about the only reason full automatic is even a technique, a viable technique to even have. Other than that, you're just wasting rounds, making a lot of
Yeah, those
noise.
G3s were fun to shoot full auto. I remember doing that a bunch with those things.
Yeah. Even with my stature, I remember, with a 20-round magazine, that's 7 yards on full automatic. At most, being able to hold most 4 rounds, usually only 3 on those TQ-15 targets, started center up and then the third, and then you could push it back down to bring it down to have maybe like the last 4 or 5 on target, but way less than half on target. It's like because it climbs such a hard rate, but
It did. It would climb.
it climbed, it climbed. But yeah, I really like the G3, but it had its place, and we would carry them, especially on manhunts, open field manhunts. We would carry them a lot. The guys would. I would actually carry one instead of my M4, and I would carry a magazine with. I always had one magazine that I carried with not AP round. Shoot.
With those 69 grain rounds,
No. Tracer rounds.
the orange tip
Yeah,
or the green tip.
the orange tip. I carried one magazine with tracer rounds with me because, of course, when you're out and about and you're in area, and the team is spread out, one of the reasons you can mark a location with tracer rounds of where an adversary would be. So that's why I carried one. I never had to use it, never did use it. Um, I got that from from some guys, that was in Vietnam. Jerry Daniels, one of the guys, tracer rounds marked the target, you know, and so that's what I would do if necessary, but never. It was never an issue. I never had to do that. That was one of the weapons, just as a team leader, that I would carry to augment the team, because everybody else was carrying M4s, our dedicated snipers. We'd have one guy carrying a bolt gun, usually, and he would double sling a bolt gun and an M4 because he had to go in and make entry. And, and if necessary, I would do the same thing, sling my M4 or sling the G3 and carry an M4. A lot of time, I would double sling, just to have the extra weaponry if the team needed it as a team commander or team leader, just so it would be there and, not 4 miles back in somebody's unit.
Exactly. Speaking of that, when did you all move from I remember you had that old, it was a hunting style rifle in the armory as your high ground gun. When did you all move up into the PSSs?
That was until the knees. I mean, literally, the knees. We were still running, because I was still running my gun, my 270, all that time. As a matter of fact, when Glenn Huber got killed, Leo Martinez was like one of the first 2 officers there. Joe Madrid was there, but he was out on the perimeter. Leo Martinez and I showed up at the Beta House, Ricky Beta House, where Glenn was killed. And I unasked with my M4. Yes, I unasked with my M4 and my 270 and deployed and told Leo, we need to go recon the house. And so I set up, I want to say on a ditch bank, and covered Leo as he made his way down to the house by himself. Just me running 6 on him, running high ground with my 270. And we later found out at that time, Ricky Beta was on that high ground watching us. And he didn't shoot us because he only had 3 rounds left.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, criminal guys told me that. He didn't shoot us because he only had 3 rounds left. He was going to
save him what he had left.
He was going to do it, but he only had 3 rounds left.
He was using a 7 mag, right?
Yes. Yeah. So Leo went up and got to the front door, and that's when he found, shit. There was one guy dead in a U-Haul, one lady at the front door dead, and then he found an infant baby dead under that door, right outside the door. I want to say right underneath that U-Haul. Anyway, I couldn't cover everything at that point in time because everybody's telling us he's still in that house. So I'm like, got on the radio, get your ass out here, Leo. We got to get more people in, So got Leo back out. And then from there, we still had intel. And everybody was 100% sure that he was still in the damn house, even from the point of people are seeing curtains move, and like shit. So we finally got enough people and just made it, by the end it was at night, and we finally got back around there, made entry, and he wasn't in there. Each and every one of those men, I gotta say, did their duty, and sucked it up because it was not a pleasure-free, with Glenn laying out there on the ground, still on the ground, because they couldn't remove him. We couldn't remove his body till we had location secure. And of course, I remember going over, saying my goodbyes on the ground. But I also remember getting the team guys and grabbing them up and telling everybody, Lynn, he's gone. We got a mission to do, and we got to do it right now. So suck it the fuck up. We got to do it. And there was not one individual that said they couldn't do it. It's like they went on Preston and did a damn good job. And one thing I regret years later is not writing each and every one of those guys up for a Medal of Valor, especially Leo.
Absolutely. Did Leo ever get one of those?
Not that I know of. Of course, by, you know, you know, uh, our mindset was just doing our job, was just doing what we needed to do. Yeah, we're just doing our job, what we needed to do. I see the last the last room that we made entry in is so funny. We had one bang, one.
On the whole team?
That's it. Oh yeah, one damn bang. And APD had given that to us, so we were saving that. So we'd made entry in the back door, on the north side of the house. Made entry, which was a utility room. Passed through, washer dryer, and then at the intersection, one went to bedrooms this way, two bedrooms, bathroom that way, kitchen, living room, master bedroom that way. So we came in. Part of the team went to the right to clear two bedrooms and a bathroom. We held on the living room. There was I want to say it was Ricky Page's girlfriend was dead, and there was two dead women. A guy in the living room, dead woman. I think one more dead person in the house. We held. Some of the guys went back, cleared back, because they thought he was in the master bedroom. So we flowed through. Emilio Craig, Forrest Smith, I believe, made entry into that room. I deployed the bang, was number 3 in the room, because I wound up going this crossover button, and I basically went straight up the room into the center of that wall, and then they flowed through and cleared the bathroom. But we did use the bang in there, no avail. He wasn't there, and then that's when we later found out he had the high ground. And then while we were doing all of that, it was funny. So let me back up to when we first got there. Um, you know, drove in, assessed the lay of the scene, the arroyo, the driveway up onto the deal, Glenn's car, Glenn's body, Ricky Bates' house, sheriff's office car, dead sheriff. Ricky Bates' mother's house was over kind of on a hill. And then that ridge with high ground, that cliff with high ground. I mean, it stood out like a castle fort. So I'm on the radio going, I'm going like, shit, if I was me, that's where I'd be, high ground. If I wanted to stand off. So I called headquarters, because I was running the mission at that time. I was in charge of running the mission. Rick Martin was a lieutenant out there, and he was giving me all the support I could handle as far as what does he need. I was like, give me the damn helicopter up here. State police helicopter. I want to fly that, because there was only one way up, one approach on foot, which basically taking Suribachi, on a
Right.
I wanted to fly that, get a flyover, and because it was still daylight, negative. The governor has it, It's like, man, I'm like,
There ever was a time for that aircraft.
oh, I got on the radio and told him, kick him out, bring him over, man. I don't care. I was so pissed. I was livid. I later got a little bit of admonishment, I guess, of my language on the radio for like,
I can imagine.
yeah,
But I can't really imagine you ever swearing on the radio.
yeah, right, yeah, yeah. Well, it wasn't always thing, but I would lose my temper, and words would fly. But yeah, but I was pretty well dissatisfied with that. But it was what it was. But So we made the entry that night, late that night, I think, is when they said that Ricky Abeda had been removed from the area, bypassed the roadblock, and driven to Albuquerque to turn himself in by a family member, which, I mean, good on him. At least he turned himself in and didn't kill no more than what he did. And killing 7 people, an infant, including an infant, 2 officers, and he shot that 12-year-old boy's ass off. Of course, New Mexico politics, 7 death sentences. Of course, he didn't receive death penalty. 7 life sentences. Wound up spending uh, uh, his time in a medium security prison in Texas, getting conjugal visits, and sired 2 more kids.
That's just is amazing to me. I mean, not
Yeah,
surprising, but
yeah, no kidding. Good old limo Democrat. We were really lucky. Leo and I were really lucky.
yeah, absolutely. The
He
fact that
didn't
he
get
was there
us.
watching you guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I mean, they, I mean, criminal agents told us he had, he had pressure on the trigger, just didn't pull it. He had his center sights, just didn't pull it on both me and Leo. I mean, we were, we were shot, you know, and it wasn't that far of a shot, maybe 150 yards, maybe, and 7 mag, you know,
Easy shot.
150 yards pistol fighting distance, really, nothing, you know, definitely nothing as far as that goes. But it was funny. But during the Ricky Abeda trial, I wound up being a expert witness, both for the prosecution and the defense, on the capabilities of his weapon, and what could have occurred, and things like that. Because they actually, I think, tried to file 2 more in there of the aggravated assault on me and Leo because of his statements of what he was going to do, and things like that. But what are you going to do?
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, let's hit pause for today
Okay.
right there. I think that'll give us a good stopping point. But I do want to thank you again for taking the time to sit down, and I've really enjoyed the way we've been kind of following the chronology of the team and what's been going on. But I think we're in the early 90s right now, so I think we still have a few years
I,
left to
yeah,
go.
I mean, we got a lot of growing to go because, from that point where Chris transitioned to me and then I took it over and started running with that and learning. Uh, there's a great deal that can be brought to light.
Absolutely.